Australians are great inventors, not sufficient innovators. Invention is where you find things, there's a very gnarly problem, you come up with a solution, that's your invention. But changing it into a product and putting it into practice, that's the innovation and translation. And usually Australians struggle with that. And looking at Australia, the biggest risk opportunity is healthcare. If we go in the current trajectory by 2040, we'll need $1 billion hospital wing every week in the country. We can't do that. It's not going to be realistic.
Part of the role is to create those chips like GPUs and data computing capacity on the land. One could come closer to being AI sovereign.
You develop Australian sovereign AI on chips we know have no backdoors. So it's aspirational, and if we are really bold, that's what we should be pursuing.
Is the word net zero a fallacy, or is it a real word?
I think
scientifically, can that be achieved?
I think there are always going to be consequences. Think of a solar panel. A lot of solar panels around the world are coming to end of life.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you. Welcome, Sharath. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
What an honor and pleasure to be sitting with you. I would like to... you are now Chief Scientist of Western Australia. I would want you to just narrate a journey, from being a young man, being curious young boy, to being a Chief Scientist today.
Well, thank you for having me here. It is a privilege to be the Chief Scientist for Western Australia. The journey question is interesting because I've never thought of it in that context. But I've always been curiosity driven, and I wanted to use curiosity to make a difference. So through education, growing up in India, the standard assumption is you have to be an engineer or a doctor or you're a failure. And so I think you're always pushed into certain fields. I come from a family where many people had done engineering, and they used to do hard manufacturing. And so I did choose engineering as a profession. But for me, my curiosity always felt it's going to be electronics and data which make a difference to the future. So I chose to be an electronic engineer. The period when I did undergraduate training, almost everyone was doing information technology. Getting jobs in IT did not matter what engineering you did, whether it's food processing or mechanical or production, they were getting a job in IT. I had a different view, was an outlier. I felt I always wanted to build the hardware on which people write their code. The language in which you write your code will change, or it'll get more automated, but you'll always need hardware. And so I wanted to pursue a degree where you're actually making the chips on which you write code. And so that led me to a program in Melbourne, Victoria. The state government is supporting a program called Chip Skills in partnership with industry. So it is to design chips, make them, program them, deploy them. It was a different time because there was quite a electronic engineering industry presence in the country. So sadly, government policies didn't support that growth here and they left. So that created a pivot. So I had all this electronics knowledge. There's no industry, then how do I make it real? So I went to the principle of why I got into it. I wanted to use electronics to make a difference. And looking at Australia, the biggest risk opportunity is healthcare. If we go in the current trajectory by 2040, we'll need $1 billion hospital wing every week in the country. We can't do that. It's not going to be realistic. We'll need almost half the population working in healthcare and related services. That's not going to happen. So my approach was, how do you keep people out of hospitals? How do you help them age better? And so I use electronics to make medical devices.
Okay. And that's the healthcare pathway. Then there on, you still doing that project?
Yep. So we use electronics to make medical devices, and generally we work a lot with industry or clinicians. So we're solving an urgent problem and make that into a product. So that was sort of my research journey. But as you do these, you need infrastructure. That's what really amps up your capability. That's what helps you turn your invention into an innovation into a product. So I built significant infrastructure over the last 12 to 14 years. About 10, 12 years back, I built a $60 million semiconductor fabrication facility. It's more research focused than manufacturing, but that allows us to prove ideas and make prototypes. 2 years back, we built a pilot manufacturing facility for medical devices. It's much more niche because you try and do everything, you'll do it poorly. So very focused on making wearable, nearable, and point-of-care diagnostic devices. And so that allows us to, instead of making 10 devices in a lab, we can do about 500 to 2000 to do trials to help Australian companies raise their valuation locally before you have to attract international capital. The third aspect is doing all this, being the engineer I am, if I see something not working, I have to fix it. And so there are a lot of policy challenges across the country, federally and at state level, which need improvement, which support innovation, which support industry growth. And so I've been very active in national policy. For the last 7 years, I've been on the board of Science and Technology Australia. So it's a peak body representing about 235,000 STEM professionals. So we advocate to government to change policy. Often bluntly, people follow the money or institutions follow the money. So the more you change policies and signals for how you fund things, you can change culture. And I think in Australia, we need a culture which is more risk-friendly, not risk-averse, and aspirational. We need to be self-sufficient, bold, aiming for the future, so that we are creators and not just consumers.
I've read, in many ways, in my understanding of the history of Australia, is we're the country of innovators. We have found stuff, and we are a country of people who are seeking knowledge and new ideas. In your work in science, what have you observed that mindset and culture of Australians being innovators?
We are, but I'll actually use a word for distinction, and that will help you understand better. Australians are great inventors, not sufficient innovators. Because invention is where you find things, there's a very gnarly problem, you come up with a solution, that's your invention. But changing it into a product and putting it into practice, that's the innovation and translation. And usually Australians struggle with that. And I think the invention piece has been really strong, I'll say due to 3 things. Australian education historically has had strong fundamentals. So people have understood the physics or the chemistry or the sciences behind a problem, been able to create new vaccines, new solutions, new products for communication, etc. The second one is there's been an inherent aspiration for people to essentially get busy with their hands, the do-it-yourself culture. And so the more you're doing things with your hand, the more you stumble on solutions. So that's the second aspect of innovation. The third one is the necessity piece. Because it's always been a big country, there's been isolation, large spaces, you've had to come up with solutions to manage it. And so that's been another strength. But in all these, because of the inability to innovate, we've not made them into products or major commercial benefit for Australians. We've created benefit for the world.
And in your work through Science and Technology Australia, and then in your observation on policy across states and territories and federal government, from invention to innovation, or from invention of an idea to a commercial grade product, that gap typically is covered through the ecosystem around the scientists, the ecosystem around the inventor, and how the industry, the academia, the government all come together to create an ecosystem and support that invention and nurture it to be a product of commercial grade and of commercial value globally. So how do you see that plays in Australia?
I think the invention piece, usually the amount of support of funding you need is lower than the translation piece. So the moment you've proven an idea, making it viable actually costs a lot of money. And it's always been an aspect of sitting back and waiting of who will pick it up. And I think that's been the challenge. And so usually it becomes big international players coming and picking it up. You used the important word, the ecosystem. And I think that's where we have major opportunities in the country to build ecosystems around areas of strength. And the ecosystem is the inventor, the pilot manufacturing, the procurer, everything. So often for an invention to become a product and be viable, someone has to be ready to buy it. And often our governments are usually the last to buy. So we need a lot of change in procurement policy at the federal and state level. You will come across a lot of medical companies and defense companies who will say it's easier to sell the product to an American partner or a European partner than to an Australian government agency, which is probably something we should look at fixing fast.
Other thing which you talked about, manufacturing of chips and then manufacturing of, you work with the hardware
Yep.
rather than the software. In terms of the next industrial revolution of AI, part of the role is to if one could create those chips like GPUs and data computing capacity on the LAN, one could come closer to being AI sovereign or being sovereign in terms of computing and producing those GPUs. So how do you see that playing, and what's the vision probably? Because in the state of Western Australia, we have probably almost all the ingredients,
Yep.
to make a GPU.
I think you're making a very good point. Western Australia and Australia are blessed with pretty geologically stable land, pretty good water, you can recycle and reuse, and all the minerals you need. So it is an opportunity they have to latch on to pretty fast. If you want any form of national resilience now, you need some control over electronics. Any field we take, whatever we call as a priority for the country, whether it's minerals processing, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, energy, everything relies on electronic chips. Yes, AI and sovereign is like the real opportunity, but even everything else needs it. So, in the fact we don't have semiconductor capabilities is a big risk to the country. And we'll have to do it in a graded form because GPU chips use the latest in semiconductor fabrication. Getting to that without failure modes is going to be very hard unless you know to do the basic chips.
Yeah.
So a good model is actually India. They decided as a strategy they need national resilience in semiconductors. They've approved 11 semiconductor manufacturing lines. They've taken the efficient approach of partnering with mature providers to build the lines, either as joint ventures or licensing deals. And so that allows them to move fast. And now each line is distinct. So some of them are making 28 nanometer microprocessors. You may say the current technology is way more advanced, but 28 nanometers is what 70% of the electronic chips sold around the world are. So that's the basic chip you need. So through that, they've made a microcontroller designed in India, programmed in India, and deployed in defense and satellite technology. So you created national resilience without even being at the cutting edge. So I think you need to start somewhere like that. The second bit is there's multiple areas you can use it for. If you do power semiconductors chips in a particular line, you can use it for all your battery charging technologies and your electric vehicles. That creates a different national resilience. And then comes what you said about GPUs and cutting edge AI. The important reason for doing it is certainly security. Then you develop Australian sovereign AI, trained on Australian content, programmed with Australian requirements on chips we know have no backdoors. So it's aspirational, and if they're really bold, that's what we should be pursuing. All three aspects, right? The basic controllers, the future of energy alternatives with semiconductors, and chips for sovereign AI.
In terms of before you have the minerals in the right form to be deployed to be a chip, there is a processing to be required.
Yep.
Converting the raw minerals to the fine tune, and that kind of upward processing. How do you see that the capacity and capability being structured within the state of WA?
See, I think traditionally people have felt it's easier to just ship what we have and it can be processed elsewhere. Processing has, I'll say, two major challenges. One, the processing technology. The second is the energy consumption and emissions. And so that's why there's a lot of effort in green processing technologies around green steel, green aluminum, etc. So I think that's one of the reasons no one's seriously taken to processing locally. The energy intensity and the expertise and labor which you need. But if you look at the state government strategy or everything, it's about how do you add more value before you actually export. So how do we stop exporting just the raw materials? How do we refine it, process it more? So I think it's a priority, and we'll have to start doing it in some critical areas. Lithium is an example. How much can you more process locally before you ship it? So you can also use it directly in batteries here. The second one is silicon. We produce a lot of silicon. We produce a lot of porous silicon. How can you actually process that to make silicon wafers locally? Then you don't have to rely on someone else. And I think, like you referred to, most of the metals and processing materials used in semiconductors are produced locally. Some of them don't need too much processing. It's more of refinement for purity, which is certainly possible.
And typically, one would start building up this capacity and capability. And now, how do you see in terms of rough timeline if one has to be aspirational to go up to the GPU capacity and capability to produce that? But one need to start with processing the minerals, converting them to the fine-tuned version so that you can create that 70% what you talked about, those microcontrollers, which does majority of the work, 28 nanometer chips, then go high upgrade. So how do you see if somebody has to start today, or what's the vision looks like?
My personal opinion is you should never start from scratch. People are doing it well, so we need to actually do effective partnerships. Joint venture with someone who's done it, with the right incentives and structures for them to be setting up facilities in WA. And I think those are the sort of conversations I'm driving. You're doing it well, how can we partner and establish something here? I think starting from scratch is probably unnecessarily painful and they'll slow you down dramatically.
From a point of view, the energy conversation, because with time, because most of the consumer grade products and most of our lifestyle is dependent on energy and power, and the consumption from a retail point of view, and if, as you said, if you want to build that advanced manufacturing space, your power production has to probably multifold. And the power dependency should not be just on one source or a few sources. You should have a good energy mix within your portfolio. And how do you see the future expansion of the energy mix should look like? What are the capacity and capabilities one could look into in the future opportunities?
See, I think within Western Australia, solar is a clear answer. And there are lots of solar fields and plants being created. I think even just a couple of weeks back, the generation and utilization of renewable energy was higher than other sources. So we are on the right track. The challenge always with solar is the storage piece. Because you need to store enough and have a deployment cycle so that you have 24 hours of uninterrupted supply. And I think advancements are happening there. I think longer term it has to be a mix of renewable energy, hydrogen type clean sources, which balance it. The related thing which you're asking about AI is with the data centers and the electronics or the chips used, how do they become more energy efficient? So, for example, the current generation of NVIDIA GPUs use a very small footprint of a data center. Because they packed in so much processing power. So that means the cooling requirements for that dramatically reduce because you're only cooling a smaller footprint. But alternatively, there's a lot of research going on in using photonics, so light for communication and information processing. Silicon photonic chips don't produce heat. And so, again, those cooling requirements go down. The third alternative is actually harnessing technologies like what we have in WA. So there's a company here called DUG Technologies. They do data centers where everything is immersed in a mineral oil. And so that doesn't need any air conditioning or cooling. So it uses, I think, about 40% of energy of a typical data center. So how do you actually look at also those sort of innovative mixes in how you approach it?
And in terms of the whole, the broader energy solution in the mix which you talked about, what kind of a role, because one needs some stability in the power space, and then one needs variability. So there is a fixed load and or a fixed base load, and then variable base load, which can come from different sources. So how do you see that equation, scientifically tested, rather than not the politics of it, but the science of it? How do you see that?
I think challenges is a lot of unknowns. I think the estimation is based on how we are going with AI and data centers. The energy needs are going to double in the next probably 6 to 7 years, which is quite a challenge. So I think that's where there's a lot of modeling going on, and I don't think there are clear answers. And the bigger question is, as we create data centers or hyperscale solutions, how much of it can be self-sufficient? Can it have its own solar farm, power itself with water, such that it doesn't put any load on the public grid? And I think that modeling is what's becoming critical. So how do you keep the public energy infrastructure separate from the industrial energy infrastructure? and then those needs can be modulated on a needs basis. For example, in the US, it's in a very different model, right? All the big data center players are buying nuclear power plants.
Yeah. And because that gives them a guarantee of power, because their power consumption is going up and up.
And it gives them social license,
Yeah.
because they're not using public energy sources. Because you don't want to be running a commercial data center, drawing public sources, and then creating blackouts for the community.
Do you think from a scientific from a science, it's a net zero sum game in terms of net carbon conversation? Is the word net zero a fallacy, or is it a real word?
I think
Scientifically, can that be achieved?
I think there are always going to be consequences. You can calculate net zero through one lens, but there are going to be consequences. I'm a big believer in whatever technology is rolled out to looking at the full circular economy of it. So you adopt it, use it, it has a life cycle. What happens at the end of the life cycle?
Yeah.
So think of a solar panel. A lot of solar panels around the world are coming to end of life. So what are we going to do with them? The silicon part of it is becomes sand. That's okay. But it has a lot of complex materials and metals in it. If they get into the water supply, it contaminates.
Yeah.
Same thing with EV. What happens to the batteries at the end of life?
Yeah.
It's a bunch of toxic materials. So windmills and turbines. So yes, you can use a solution to get to a net zero equation, but there might be other consequences. So I think factoring all that into it in both the scientific and pragmatic context matters.
And I think you picked up very right that net zero does not consider the whole life cycle of a product. It just does that. You want to achieve a mathematical equation, which might be true today because of the variables of the unknowns. You don't know so many things. It's some way that you can achieve it today, but it'll go out of hand, because if you want to calculate the end of life numbers, you might not achieve net zero because you are creating contaminants in many levels.
And the recycling and processing may consume a lot of energy at the end of life cycle. So that's why some of these don't have a direct answer. We create constructs based on what we know today, not the unknowns. And so that's why in any project I get into, I start looking really at the full circular economy of it. I think one example which we often are familiar with is when people started using coal as part of industrial revolution. There were warnings at some stage, then it became all normal, we forgot about it, now we look at the consequences. We had coatings in cooking vessels, Teflon, which then became a carcinogen, that is quickly adopted it. We now struggle with the consequences of PFAS, which were used in firefighting foams.
Ammonia and hair colors.
So there are a lot of things. So I always, though I'm an engineer and I love technology, I always feel technology will overreach. So we need to put guardrails, understand its consequences well in adopting it.
My last question on energy, as we'll have nuclear subs on our shows, it's essentially a nuclear power plant on the beach. Most of Australia lives near the sea. Is that coming closer to a social license?
Australia has been pretty averse to having a conversation about nuclear energy because it's viewed through a lens of what happens to nuclear waste. And I think we need to have a really honest, scientific and balanced debate about it. Yes, there have been a few incidents around the world, but the majority of the plants, every year the safety regulations around it grow, and it's one of the cleanest forms of energy. And we're using a half-life product from Earth, harnessing its energy source and then disposing it. So I think people need to actually look at it as part of the energy mix. It's probably going to make things more viable. It may have an upfront cost, but like you said, if you have a nuclear sub and you're not building a nuclear plant, at least you might use it that way.
Yeah, so we already have a nuclear power plant sitting on our shores in form of a nuclear submarine. It's a smaller version of a power plant, but it still is a power plant.
Exactly. I think that's something we have to investigate seriously about how do we tap into it and maximize. And the related one, like I said, the aversion here is there'll be nuclear waste. You can't store it in my backyard.
No.
But there have been massive advances in nuclear waste storage in the UK and Europe.
And US.
Yeah.
In terms of, because I just wanted to, one follow up on that one, um, how might we achieve that kind of a balanced debate on this topic? Because the politics comes into play all the time. Before we go to politics out of it, how we source the money or where the waste goes, why can't the scientists community or people who can have that balanced debate come on a platform and just have openly, as you said, that it's one of the cleanest and cleanest fuel and most stable fuel to be used and can support our future viability and sustainability as a country.
Yeah, and I think you're right in saying we can't expect people in the political sphere to do it because it's unfair, because they represent their constituents. And if their constituents don't understand it and are unhappy, that's what they have to represent. And so it is down to the scientific community, the engineering community to explain it, get people on side. So there have been some efforts, but I think it's sort of been left behind because there's been no urgency, and often necessity is the mother of all invention. People are like, okay, there are other energy sources coming on. In Australia, we have the solar option, so we don't need to talk about nuclear. But I think this conversation will have to happen sometime soon.
And it's a known fact. All those countries who have prospered became from developing to developed nations. The key element for them is an energy security.
Yes.
If you don't have energy, you will not be able to produce.
It makes you a net exporter.
Yeah. So I think there's a critical conversation to be had for future sustainability. From a point of view of your current role as chief scientist, could you talk about what's the role entails? What are the aspirations and what big northern stars you're looking at?
So the role entails providing independent advice to government and departments on science strategy, innovation, and opportunities. Being independent, I can give bold, blunt, frank advice based on scientific evidence. And as much as I'm able to encourage them to listen, we can implement things. The good thing in WA is the government has a lot of intent. They want to actually diversify economic opportunities for the people. We've been resource rich, but how do you use that ability to become an innovation rich society? So that way they have to be commended. They really want to make that happen. So my aspirational goals in this, I'll say, probably sit in 4 areas. The first one is actually the early education piece. I think we need to support and empower children going through schooling to understand the value of STEM, what the opportunities there are. And often it doesn't mean you're going to be building a bridge standing out somewhere or bent over a beaker in a chemistry lab. STEM disciplines are very wide and how you use the expertise. So I think empowering them to understand that so that we have a talent pipeline. The second one is make the place attractive enough to get talent now, because we need talent in engineering, we need talents for the defense industries, we need talent for the medical sector. So how do you actually make it attractive? And a lot of that talent also relates to entrepreneurship, new companies, new ideas. Now to attract the talent comes a third piece, which is infrastructure. So we were having this discussion about invention and innovation. Once people invent something, unless they can scale it up locally, we lose the idea or the value of the idea to the country, because it's bought by someone, it's developed elsewhere. And so we need to create infrastructure which allows scale up manufacturing of technologies. So my aspiration there is we can actually have precincts and capabilities that we can do it in the medical field for drugs and devices. We do it in the defense industries for new demonstrations. We do it in the grains and agriculture space where we produce more legume and wheat varieties and demonstrate their acceptance. And we could look at it in quite a few disciplines. And the last one is actually the tight focus. We can do a lot, but that means we'll only sprinkle and not get sense of scale. So it is trying to advise the government to pick a few winners, focus on them for a 3 to 5 year period, get them off and running, and then focus on the next. Which means you will not please everyone, but I think that will be the best benefit to the state. Picking a few, doing them really well.
And how do you see in terms of that, early education? Because some private schools are introducing AI tools to secondary education at the schools level. So how do you see AI being part of the STEM conversation now, and how the STEM has to be expanded probably to AI as part of the STEM?
So I think schools have a duty to the community to trial out everything which is new, because you have to be preparing students for the world. But where the real opportunities in education lie, in my personal opinion, are two things: teaching children critical thinking and giving them the aptitude to learn. Because in their life, the one thing which is guaranteed is they're going to have to constantly learn and reinvent themselves. The technology or industrial revolutions are going to be so fast that they're going to have to move between jobs at least 2 or 3 times in their life, move between careers potentially. So I think critical thinking and aptitude to learn. And when we talk about AI, people have asked me, now everyone has knowledge at their fingertips. Why do they need education? And I, as an engineer, I just tell them, to me, people don't have knowledge. They have information at their fingertips. So knowledge is information plus critical thinking. So the more you teach people to analyze the information they have, draw the best insights, they become smart. They become innovators and they'll survive in different work settings. And I think that's probably the biggest opportunity for schools.
Can a thought I'm having, because right now the current AI is designed to identify research and information at an intern level capacity, and it's slowly building up its capacity to a PhD level researcher. But if somebody who's a fresh graduate comes out who has that capacity to do initial research or being an intern at a small organization, and then people like me who were fresh graduates were supported and then mentored by our managers and then bosses across our career, and they taught us how to ask questions and how to think differently, and how to see this data is right or wrong, what right looks like and what is wrong. And if AI could do, and then those frontline jobs are gone, which is for that workforce, who will be the mentors and the educators and people who are managers who are helping them to form when they turn 40, 50 years old, they have the good form, they can define what right and good and bad looks like. So what will happen with that workforce?
See, I think you were talking about this, the intern level and the researcher level and the PhD level. I think there's still not enough confidence that the AI will get to that point. It's a very good, LLMs are an excellent way of consolidating information, summarizing it and presenting it to you. But how accurate or how well it's done, I think that critical thinking layer, those managers who do the training, who teach you to ask questions of the AI or of people, I think will still be indispensable. I think it has to be proven that you can actually trust information from the AI. I think it's still a while away.
Yeah, there are hallucinations, and if you ask a very open-ended question, and it might find sources which are not there, which has been identified multiple times. And how do you see?
So I'll just add a bit. I feel the real power of AI currently is taking unstructured data in a closed system and creating sense of it. What I mean is, if you're using AI or Gen AI in a broad context, there's a lot of strange content out there. It consolidates that and it can get messy. But say if you're working in a closed system with ecology data or health data, querying AI with very tight constraints to draw insights, it can be very powerful. Say if you have health data from across WA, you're seeing some disease trends. You try and query the disease trend against some ecological factors, say water quality or temperature trends. And then you might know, okay, that place is facing extreme heat, so people are constantly developing a particular disease. So I think that sort of tight insight, which you couldn't do by standard data analysis, is where it will be powerful in the near term.
In conclusion, as in people who are, working with young people, and what's the future holds in terms of how science and critical thinking and having that aptitude will be the key skills in the future rather than the other skills which people aspire for. How does the skill matrix or skills which are important to us will change in the coming years? What do you see that?
See, I think that's how education has changed. Before AI, one of the other examples in classrooms was calculators. If you use calculators, children will not know the times table. The question then becomes, should they know the times table when it's easy to just use a calculator? Then it's a question of what actual skills do you need? And I think that's what happens going forward. The skills they need are curiosity, so they actually have intent to do work, critical thinking, so that they can analyze consequences, and I'll say being taught foresight and strategy. So they shouldn't always look at the narrow problem and the short-term win, but what is the consequence of their action? It's a bit like chess. You have to think 5 moves ahead. And training people to constantly think of that effect of consequences and the untrodden paths, I think, is important. It's a bit like when I was referring to the circular economy piece. People need to really think all the way down. Not use it to be risk averse, but use it to risk mitigate.
Lovely. Thank you, Sharath. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me again.